About the little joke about the family that took their son to church for the first time. He was about 4 or 5 years of age. So after they took him going home, the father looked at the son and says, "Well, what did you think?" The little boy says, "Well, I liked the music. It was good. I liked it." Then he thought for a while and says that the commercial was too long, talking about the sermon. My kids have always told me that I need to speak up and shut up. Nancy liked that one. But I'm going to make a little commercial here for our 10 o'clock class. We finished up this morning the 12-part series of the Ken Ham's Answers in Genesis. And we had on our schedule going into getting involved with the wall builder's presentation on the Christian basis or foundation of our country. Different than the one we had last year, but still maybe covering the same basis. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at it. But when I set off and got that particular series, there's 26 lessons in that particular series. I got 2 other videos. The one that I have at home was 55 minutes long. It was called talking about our country being exceptional. It was talking about exceptionalism. Neither Steve and I particularly cared for that one. Then when we reviewed the one that I have in my hand right now, it's called The Spiritual Heritage of the United States Capitol. This is 2 hours long. We will take it in probably 3 40-minute sessions. But this particular video is where David Barton, the founder and the president of the Wall Builders Organization, takes you on a tour of the United States Capitol building, where the Senate and the Congress representatives meet. You were introduced to that this week if you watched any of the Washington funeral services for George Bush. But he takes you to a tour of the building and shows you the various pictures, the various statues, and the things that were in their lives, a little bit of a biology of their lives, showing the fact that our government was organized by Christian people. You go to our colleges today, and they will say, well, every one of the signers of the Constitution were deists. And he disproves that. After we saw this, the only comment I had was one word: wow. It is my recommendation that we try to get together at 10 o'clock next Sunday morning, because I'm going to start showing it next Sunday morning for 3 weeks. I think every home that has children, every home that has grandchildren or great-grandchildren ought to have this video. And they ought to show it to your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. Because one of the things that is being taken away from us, is trying to be taken away anyway, is the Christian heritage of our nation. So if you want to look at it, there's a little statement in the back that will describe what's being done. Yeah, I'm going to leave it up here, and you can come up and look at it. But don't take it, because I need it for next Sunday morning. We also have been talking about the various hymns that were carols that we sing at Christmas time. We used different ones. We talked about the Hark the Herald Angels Sing. And for the life of me, I can't remember the first one we went through, so maybe somebody has a better memory in mind.
A Little Town of Bethlehem.
A Little Town of Bethlehem, that's right. Thank you. But this morning we're going to talk about we 3 kings. the earliest recollection that I have of this carol was in a Christmas pageant that was being put on by my home church, Bellevue, Pennsylvania, a suburb of Pittsburgh. A family church where it was a lot of our family went. I had 3 aunts that went, 2 aunts that went, and my family. And we all sat together, and we all enjoyed each other. It was always a time of goodness as far as I was concerned. But my brother, my cousin Don, and myself were the 3 kings. And the thing I remember most about it was the fact that the crown that they had on my head kept slipping off. I had to walk up with the gift in my hand and my hand on the ground. I can remember doing that. But we went up, as they were singing the first verse, we went up, and the congregation was singing with 3 kings. I happened to be the first one, because I always made mistakes. They didn't want me to make mistakes. I was the youngest of the 3. I went up and presented the gold. My brother presented the frankincense. And my cousin presented as those verses were being sung. And then we all stood there and worshiped Christ. But I remember that. This song was actually written for the idea that it was for a man's trio. The 3 of them would sing the first and the last verse. But one would sing the second verse, everybody would sing the chorus. The next one would sing the third verse, and then everybody would sing the chorus. And the last one would sing the 4th verse, and everyone sing the chorus. And that's how it was written. And names were given to the various kings that were there. And those names happened to be, and I'll tell you in a minute what they were. I can't find them right now. I'm not even following my notes. But they were Melchior, Casper, and Balthazar. Now, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing those right. We'll talk about them a little bit more. But the author of this particular hymn was named John Henry Hopkins. He started to write it, from what I understand, in 1850. And he completed it for a Christmas pageant that was being presented in New York City. As I said, they were each one was to sing a different one. John Hopkins happened to be a journalist for one of the New York newspapers. He was attending the University of Vermont when he was writing this as a student, deciding to be a lawyer. And as he graduated from the University of Vermont, he decided that he was going to be a preacher. And so he went to the college that was in New York City. I'll tell you the name, General Theological Seminary in New York City. When he graduated from that particular college, he was ordained into the, quote, clergy. The reason I say that I don't believe the Bible authorizes the clergy in laity. I think they're all one. I think you're as much equal as I am, or I'm as much equal as you are. But he was ordained into the clergy in the Episcopal Church. And he became, 5 years later, he became the music professor for the college in New York City, the General Theological Seminary. It was during the last year, his final year, that he finished with 3 Kings, and the presentation was made. At which time he took the ministry of the church, of the Episcopal Church in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. And I have been through Williamsport in my life when I went to New York City, and it's a pretty big town. There were several things about We Three Kings that I think we need to approach and talk about. I have 4 basic things that I think are highly important. First of all, we see manger scenes today with both the shepherds and the kings. That is not biblical. If you study Matthew's account of the kings and Luke's account of the shepherds were the first one to hear the angels sing, and the idea that they went to the manger to be able to worship Christ. But then when you study about the kings coming to Bethlehem to be able to present their gifts, Jesus was in a house. So it was at a different time, and some people think that Jesus was a little older, maybe a year old, or maybe 2 years old, or so forth, at that particular time. Whenever you see a manger scene today, they try to get it in the kings. We had a live manger scene when I was preaching down in Corbin, Kentucky. And one of the things that we had done was the idea of the kings were behind the church, and every time we had a presentation or sing some songs, the kings would come up and the shepherds would lead, so they were never at the manger scene at the same time. Ironton Church one year had a pageant down there where they took the front of their church, and they had different sang booths where they had there, and they also tried to keep the kings from being at the manger at the time. So we need to realize that there are some things that are being presented by that. The second thing that interests me was this idea of kings. The Bible does not mention the fact that they were kings. I sat at the computer this past week, and I pulled up every translation that I had on the computer. I think I have around 12, 13 different translations. And the word kings was never used in the New Testament to relate to these gentlemen that came from the East to be able to bring the gifts of Jesus Christ. The word magi was the word which we use for in relationship to our magicians. The magi was wise men were the two of them. In some translations, the word astrologer was used. In one translation, a very, very, very old translation, had sorcerers. And I don't think they were sorcerers. As far as having 3, again, that is a speculation. The idea that there were 3 gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, would indicate that some people there were 3 kings. But to imagine people traveling in that distance from the east to Jerusalem and Bethlehem. At that particular time, when robbery was so prevalent, there had to be more than 3 persons involved. I heard somebody, a preacher this past week on one of the stations I was listening to, make a comment, the fact that there had to be probably maybe 100 more or more people that would come. The idea of there being kings possibly would come from 2 different sources. Number one, their ready access to Herod, who is king of Judea. One king represented receiving another. They had ready access. That I don't think would have that much bearing in my thinking, but it might in yours. But there were 3 Old Testament prophecies that are written there that have some idea as far as the kings are concerned. Isaiah 60, verses 5 and 6, where it talks about the caravans coming to be able to worship worship the Lord. Psalm 72, verse 10 and verse number 15, which talks about some high political figures coming to be able to worship Jesus. Interesting. Third question, which I think is important, is the idea as to where were they from? Where were they from? One of the prophecies says that they came from Tarshish. Tarshish was the biblical name for Spain, which is coming from the west, not the east. Where were they from? Oh, there's a lot of speculation. I saw one major scene painted when we were looking at some, where they were painted and they looked exactly like the Chinese people. We were from the Orient, therefore they were painted in the Oriental style. I'm going to give you my opinion. Notice I said opinion. If you read the Old Testament, Queen Esther, a young Jewish girl, ascended to the throne through a beauty pageant, and reigned over the Medes and the Persians, which is now modern-day Iran. And in her reigning over these people, she used her influence in favor of the Jewish people. And through her influence, the Jewish people were able to return back home to Jerusalem. And in my own personal opinion, that because of that influence lasting for many, many years, that these three magi, wise men, or these wise men, I'm going to leave the three out, came from the Medes of the Persians, or the Persian people. And last, what about the star? As I was reading my notes over this morning, I noticed I left something out. The Tony Cavalier, this past week, was talking about one of the nights that in the forecast is going to be a starry night. And as he turned and looked at the map that he had there of our area, he said maybe somebody needs to go out and figure out which star it was that led the wise man to the manger. It wasn't a natural star. It wasn't a natural star. And some people believe it was a coming together of three different planets. And I've seen that happen with two in which the star was extremely bright. But I want you to realize that Bethlehem was towards the east and south of Jerusalem. And that star which led them to Bethlehem from Jerusalem would be going in the wrong direction. In my opinion, I feel very strongly that this star, the Star of Bethlehem, was a special creation of God in order to honor his son and to call attention to the birth of his son. But there are some good things. There are some good things. And I have three written down. Number one, Christ came for all people. He came for the poor. He came for the rich. The shepherds as opposed to the wise men. He came for the Jew as well as the Gentile. Again, the shepherds as opposed to the wise men. And most of all, and I'm trying to hurry through this, do you realize that these gifts were expensive? The gift of gold was fit for a king. The gift of frankincense was fit for a god, or deity, or a priest. The gift of myrrh was good for a prophet. So through these gifts, God is using these gifts as announcing to the world that Jesus Christ was king, priest, and prophet. King because he rules over his people. Priest because he speaks to God on behalf of the people. Prophet because he speaks to the people on behalf of God. And something we might not think about. They were called down into Egypt, where they spent several years until King Herod died. Because Herod wanted to kill the kids. He did that in Bethlehem. The means by which they were financed on this trip was the gifts that they were given at the birth of Jesus. God provides. God provides. Star of wonder, star of light. Star with royal beauty bright. Westward leading, still proceeding. God is to thy perfect light. Today, the star of Bethlehem is Jesus Christ. If we follow him, if we give him our heart, our life, and we surrender all to him, we'd be surprised what God can do through us. We're going to be singing our song of invitation. Just as I am, one verse only. If there's anyone that needs to accept Christ, any decisions that have to be made, we ask that you make it while we sing the first verse.